Hello, welcome. I'm Amy Anderson, and I'm joined today by John Gwin. John is the co-founder and CEO of the Auctus Group, which is a financial and operations consulting company with a focus on billing and revenue cycle management. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Terrific. Well, John, I asked you to have this conversation with me because one of the common questions that comes up when I'm speaking with plastic surgeons who are starting a new practice is, should I accept insurance in my new private practice? And I know you get this question a lot as well. You've been involved in many new practice startups yourself. How do you advise a surgeon in that situation who is questioning if they should take insurance?
I think the dream in many practices, especially in the aesthetic end of the industry, is to not deal with insurance because your ROI is higher, your dollars per hour is higher. So people tend to head that direction. But when you're just starting out, having several verticals in your business, so you don't have to just rely on the seasonality of cosmetics or self-pay may dip with the economy, having that insurance revenue and that referral stream can be really important, especially when you're starting out. So I think it's a good thing to have as an option. You can always shade your schedule to one side or the other to focus on cosmetics while you can accept insurance, but having that option is important. And then I always like to remind people about the timeline because it's not quick.
It's definitely not quick. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Before we do, though, in general, you and I know that not all procedures are reimbursed at the same rate or the same degree of value as others. So what are the types of procedures that tend to have reasonably good reimbursement through insurance?
Comparative to cosmetic, none, unfortunately. However, I really like breast reconstruction from a reimbursement standpoint. I think there's pretty high reimbursement there comparatively to other procedures. Hand recon is pretty strong as well. There's a lot of gray area procedures like the reductions and nasal septal recons and blephs and panics, and those are all hard pills to swallow because there's so much less than the cosmetic rates. Like a breast reduction is probably going to be roughly $600 an hour in the OR.
Yeah.
Is it better than not being busy? Sure. And then there's some other areas that are burgeoning in the sub-segment area in plastics that have great reimbursement, but it's probably not going to last. Lipedema is one, gender affirming surgery is another, but that's not going to fit everybody's practice.
Sure. I think one of the common areas that I get asked about are skin cancers and skin lesions. I think I know what you might say, but how's the reimbursement on those procedures?
I actually like them for dollars per hour.
Okay.
You're going to get $500 to $700 maybe if you're doing a complex closure on that excision. But if you can knock them out in 20, 15 minutes and you do four, five, three of them an hour, that's actually going to be better than a breast reconstruction in the OR, or breast reduction in the OR, excuse me.
Yeah. I think what I usually say is if they can do it in the office, if they're willing to do them as locals, minors in the office, they have the assistant to help them. If they have to go to a surgery center, it's almost never going to be worth it. Just the time, the inefficiency of it. The other thing I think of, and I'm glad you said this in terms of verticals and just sometimes we're just trying to get busy and bring patients into the practice. Skin cancers can be one of those procedures that people are just really happy, right? Like you cured their cancer, you took care of a scary thing, which in our surgeons world is kind of a minor thing. It's a minor procedure. It's relatively easy, very low complication rate. And so you can really make a good impression on those patients that just helps with building the reputation and later could, turn into cosmetic surgery for them or somebody in their family.
Right. You've got a captive audience. They're in the room. Maybe you've got your TV up over here with your advertisements. Maybe they build up the courage to ask about that AUG on the post-op, whatever.
Yeah. And we should always be selling them sunscreen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there are a few procedures that pay reasonably well. But you alluded to this a few minutes ago about that it's not a fast thing in terms of getting set up for insurance and then also getting paid. But talking about the sign up process, what is the process for getting contracted, getting signed up to participate with insurance? What are the steps involved and how long does that take?
It's a painful process. Like for us as a rev cycle management company, we have a contracting department, and I always joke that it's going to be a really bad first date. And I like to set that expectation up front because it's unreasonably slow and unreasonably arduous, and you will never understand how painful it is unless you've been through it, even if you're told about it, because it just makes no sense. We get like, I'd say 25% response rates on our monthly, biweekly requests for updates on these throughout the process. And that's just it. You're dealing with, bulk email addresses with no name behind it. There's a 1-800 number where you can call twice in an hour because you're on hold for 30 minutes and get 2 different answers. So it's not rocket science. It's a lot of bang head in same spot on wall for 6 months. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the process is gather all of your demographics, all your licenses, all your supporting documentation, fill it out on an application, fill it out on a couple central registries like CAQH or PICOS if you're dealing with Medicare, and then wait for them to approve your credentialing. And then after credentialing, you have to request a contract. And then once you get the contract, you can choose to negotiate or attempt to negotiate rates. And then you get an approval date, and then you have to wait for your paperwork after that. And then they also have to load your contract. So it's like these little incremental steps of what should just be one process. Mm-hmm. Timeline wise, I genuinely say to everybody 3 to 6 months is best case scenario. That's not truly best case scenario. You can knock Medicare out in 60 days. They'll backdate 30 occasionally. Medicaid can be closer to 60 depending on the state. The Blues are pretty good in some states, could be 60 days. But if I set that expectation for a provider that's just starting out and they don't hit that timeline, now they can't see patients for one of their biggest payers in the first 3 months of practice. So 3 to 6 months is our kind of stock answer.
Yeah. And in my experience working with your team, that's pretty spot on. And I think it's wise to say, expect the longer on that, just because it's so much out of your hands. And one of the reasons I appreciate that I can refer to your team is, like you said, it's not hard to do it. It's just tedious, and it's the follow-up. Submitting the application is the relatively easy portion. Right. It's following up, making sure it was received, making sure it's getting processed. Most of us don't have that kind of time or patience to do it. So that is a service your team will offer, correct?
Yeah. And the other part is, you'll sit for processing, and then they'll say, oh, just, actually the check that you sent us doesn't have the comma between the LLC and the name of the business, but your CP 575 IRS letter does. So we need a new check. And then you're back in queue for another month to sit for that step. So it's nutty. And then a lot of people starting out are worried about rates too. And that's going to add significant amounts of additional time because the payers know you don't have breathing room to waste that time. And so they're going to drag you out on your contract. So you start getting starved of not being able to see the patients. There are contract negotiation firms. We are not one of them because it's a specific niche sub skill set, but it's potentially an 18-month process and a $20,000 to $60,000 investment.
Wow. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I get asked that question as well about negotiating contracts. And in my experience, unless you're working with a specialized agency who does that, and even then, it's very difficult to negotiate as a small practice, and especially as a single physician, right? Like the attention goes to hospitals and large medical groups. To even get an opportunity to negotiate as an individual is almost unheard of without professional expertise.
Yeah, it's getting to somebody to even open the conversation is a challenge because there aren't those contact points, the story of why they care about adding you to the network versus sending their patients to Dr. Joe just down the block who didn't argue with them. It's extremely difficult. So yeah.
Okay. And one thing that I know, I kind of get tripped up on and in the timeline of opening a new practice is none of this can even start until we have an address, right? So having a signed lease or purchase agreement, knowing where the location is going to be, has to be in place before your team can even get started. Because without an address, we don't really exist. There's nothing to put on the application forms. Is that right?
Yeah, and don't use mom and dad's or your buddy down the blocks, and don't put your cell phone number on there because that's going to get online. And then there's all these little sites like HippoSpace and NPI.com and all these random sites that'll pull the info, and you have to go to every single one of them and pull it down.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good info. So, the alternative to contracting yet still taking insurance is to be out of network. Can you explain for everybody, what does it mean to be out of network, and when should a surgeon consider it?
Out of network means you don't have a contract. So the payer knows that you're licensed, that you exist, but you don't have a contract with them. So the process of getting reimbursement can be extremely difficult there because there is no agreed upon rate. And so you're going to send them a bill. They're going to say, we don't know who you are, to delay it, send me a W-9. They'll lose that. All the games they play with regular billing are going to be exacerbated. And then you always have that rate negotiation argument to make because there is no contract. Patients also really don't understand the process. They're not used to it. So there's some admin, operational setup to do, expectation setting, dealing with the headache. So it's basically a longer, more painful process, but you've got the opportunity to hit some home runs because there can be cases that are extremely viable out of network where you'll get 10x what you will in network. It's going to be hit and miss though. So.
Yeah, I do get asked about that a lot because I think, surgeons talk and they have a friend that's out of network and they hear that they got $80,000 on a breast reduction and well, who doesn't want that? But that's few and far between. And it probably took 2 years to get that payment, and 20 others were denied in the process, right? Like it's just not every case is going to be a home run like that.
Yeah, our reimbursement rates for proper reimbursement on year 2 versus year 1 for out of network claims are twice as high. We have a 200% inflation, so that's how long it can take. And if you're starting to practice out, you're betting on being solvent on your cosmetics only because this has got to be considered found money on out of network billing. You can't. It's not consistent enough to be able to build a business plan off.
Yeah. Good. Okay. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about another topic that isn't totally exciting, but is one of those necessary components when a surgeon is accepting insurance, and that's prior authorization. I think most surgeons kind of have heard the term. They know it. We're kind of playing Mother May I with the insurance companies, but tell us, what is prior authorization and why is it such an important step in the revenue cycle?
Sure. You're essentially asking permission to render the procedure and having the insurance company assess, is it medically necessary per their medical policy guidelines? So don't think about what you think with the patient, think about what they think. And they have them posted online typically, but you've got to check every box to get coverage. And so this process is you sending maybe a letter, documentation, maybe photos, depending on the procedure. And then they're going to review it and say, yes, we consider this medically necessary. The first sentence after that on the letter is always going to be, but this is not a guarantee.
Right.
So it's a necessary box to check. It gives you ammo on the back end if you want to submit a claim and fight them if they deny it. But it's not unheard of to get a prior auth and then get a denied claim.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, there's a couple other parts that the auth doesn't cover. It doesn't assess if the patient even has active coverage. I have seen auths issued for a patient that termed coverage a month ago. It doesn't check if they're in network with your provider. So they could issue an auth and you're out of network because it's some, Humana Gold Plus Platinum, whatever. And then it doesn't tell you what you're going to be paid or if you're going to be paid at 100%. So we always recommend with an auth that you do a case valuation if you're out of network, meaning assess how much it might be worth minus the patient's benefits. So you know how much that patient's going to owe. And then in network, same thing, but you're checking what you want to pre-collect from that patient at least, so they're not surprised with the deductible on the back end. Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad you went through those steps because you're right. Just an authorization, it's never a guarantee first and foremost. And then, like you said, the eligibility component, the benefits are a whole different part of that process. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you and I both know there are so many steps in the revenue cycle. It's not just we file a claim and we get paid. These are all the steps that happen before any of that ever happens, even before the service happens. One of the things we often say is that revenue cycle is a team sport, and it truly involves everybody in the office. This is not a billing office function. Every person in the office has a role to play, and including the surgeon. And what I often say is, that the surgeon's role is really that documentation piece. That is the most critical, crucial part. that they play. And tell us, why is that documentation so important when it comes to prior auths as well as getting the claim paid?
Yeah, I mean, documentation is basically the source of truth. If it's not documented, it didn't happen, both from a regulatory and a billing standpoint. So never mind billing. If you're not documented appropriately, your license is on the line potentially. And that's based on the insurance documentation standards, again, not on yours. So a good consult note is going to provide the background of functional impairment and conservative therapy to get something pre-authorized. So knowing those boxes to check and making sure you're hitting those points in your documentation can be really important. Yeah. And then for surgery, it's got to be extremely clear what was rendered, not only in the body of the op report, but really like having our surgeon's bullet point at the top. I did this and this and this, and don't unbundle, but you got to kind of idiot proof it, because you don't have a plastic surgeon reading that op report, or a nurse, or maybe even a coder. It's unfortunately an overworked, underpaid, poorly trained, somebody that's getting run through an offshore, business over there reviewing those records oftentimes, and they're not put in a position where they can even give you the adequate time to review your records. So make it easy for them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier that many of the major insurance companies have their medical policies online. Yes. And we often will recommend, let's download those policies and let's build those documentation templates to make it easy to, like you said, check all the boxes. They are looking for specific verbiage and very specific things. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We just kind of take that as a framework. Now, we're not going to falsify the documentation, of course, but if we can check the box that, yes, it's a breast reduction patient and they have, rashes under the breast and grooving in the shoulders, and they've tried PT, and we can go down the list of conservative treatment. That kind of sets us up for success. I also say that helps if you're doing a lot of peer-to-peer reviews. I'm going to say your documentation is lacking, because if we put it all in the note, you should never have to get on the phone with that reviewer and do the peer-to-peer review. So it's a little bit of legwork up front, but definitely makes the whole prior auth and then claims processing workflow a lot smoother.
Yeah, and those peer-to-peers are always frustrating, because you're on with somebody that is not of like specialty, perhaps explaining the procedure more than discussing it clinically.
Exactly.
I've got to shamelessly plug, because I'm super nerdy about this, but we put a breast reduction calculator on our website. I can show you the URL after, but you just plug in height and weight, and it spits out grams to be removed. So,
oh, there you go. Nice. Okay, so one of the things, or I guess when a surgeon is looking for a billing company, someone to partner with to handle their revenue cycle, what are some of the key services and features that they should be looking for?
Sure. So on the services end, I would take a look at what their SO statements of process say they will do. So are they going to submit claims? Probably. Deal with rejections? Definitely should be. Post payments? Yes. Then you can kind of get into these edge items. Coding is carved out of a lot of these contracts. So knowing if coding is part of your rate, they may not send patient statements. They may not have a call center for patients to ask questions. So making sure that they're covering every step of the rev cycle you expect them to. Most billing companies won't do auths, or they're not going to roll it into the rate. There might be a separate charge. Contracting and credentialing is another consideration. That's not going to be part of that billing contingency rate. So itemizing out, making sure they're handling rev cycle, but do you have these other pieces that are similar to billing, but not quite exactly billing, that are included or not? So, to ask for that.
Yeah. I think if I can say, I think it's a great point, just to be really clear that not all billing companies have the same services, or there might be add-on fees if they offer it, like just being really clear on what you're even being proposed and understanding if that's what meets your needs. I think that's really good.
Yeah. And then I guess on the rate bit, contingency is going to be common, right? Like that's typically what you're going to see, but beyond that, I think contract terms are super important. Mm-hmm. Many billing companies have longer terms, 12, 36, 24 months. A lot of them are going to have burn down clauses, essentially. So they're going to be holding on your AR for 60, 90 days after you term, if you term. And then a lot of them don't necessarily stand by errors. So having some sort of guarantee of like what sort of liability do they accept if they make a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Those are good things. One of the things that I appreciate so much about the Auctus group that you and I are extremely aligned on is that you bill from their practice management system. Why is that so important?
Control, transparency. Those are the two big things. A lot of billing companies are more concerned about their efficiency. So it's all right, I'm going to bill in my system that my team knows that they move really quick in, and that's great for them, but you're not paying them for their time. You're paying them to get a job done. And then if you need reports or you have a question at the front desk about how much the copay was and was it paid, your team needs to know two systems to be able to check on their own. So you're really kind of flying blind and out of control of your own information. So we always recommend working in the client system. Can do it outside of it, but it's just kind of a fragmented process then.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, not to go down the rabbit hole, but that means choosing their system is really important. And that's a conversation we have. And it really does depend on, are they going to do insurance? Because it narrows the selection of PM systems that we're willing to go with if they're going to need that insurance billing component. Because like you, I don't want to fragment it. I don't want two systems. I don't think that's great for anybody.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So I always tell surgeons I work with that it should never be a secret how any of their partners or vendors or advisors are paid. I'm really big on that price transparency because I think too often in the healthcare industry that people can get taken advantage of. And so I know we're aligned on that as well. So tell us, how does Auctus get paid?
So we're contingency basis, which is meaning we take a percentage of what the physician is paid, typically a month in arrears. I don't know a billing company that doesn't bill a month in arrears because you've got to close the month financially. But taking a percentage of the insurance revenue and then the patient payments related to the insurance revenue, meaning copays, coinsurance, deductible. I think some people try to carve that out, but as a billing company, you have no idea what patient is going to hit the front door and therefore how much it's going to drop to the balance. So if somebody's negotiating with you on that, they're putting themselves in a very financially tenuous position. I think rates for plastic surgery, aesthetics, 5 to 6 to 7 range is going to be more typical. We're a little above that. You will find people below that. I think anytime that you are seeing rates below 5, unless you're doing over 2 to 3 million in revenue, or if you're seeing a per claim price, just ask some questions about where's the work being done, and the you get what you pay for thing is often a thing. And I'm not knocking offshoring. We have people outside of the US, but making sure you know who's doing what, where they sit, and who's going to be working your account is super important.
Yeah. One of the things that I know makes a successful relationship with an outside revenue cycle company is really thinking them as an extension of your practice, not as a vendor, not as somebody who just owes you something. Like, yes, there is that scope of work that you're expected to do, but I find that the most successful ones are when we're very highly communicative, working on process together, not just blindly putting things in the computer and assuming that the biller is just taking care of it from there.
Yeah, and that gets back to that whole team approach to billing that you talked on, right? If front desk doesn't register the patient or doesn't get a copy of the card or puts it in wrong, then it gets to billing, and billing should double check that. But if they miss one, then you have a denied claim. And that if there's not feedback on Johnny at the front desk is using Blue Cross, not the HMO, and I have 50 claims here, now that, the reverse is true. We've got to be communicating bilaterally and frequently to prevent the issues that are coming into the practice.
Yeah. What is one thing you wish all surgeons knew or understood about insurance billing?
I can come up with more than one, but I think the biggest thing for me to emphasize would be just the degree and severity of how denials are going to impact the process. You can do things really accurately and appropriately and still get denials. It's just, my job wouldn't exist if that weren't true. We did a study on breast reductions last year. We're doing one on recon this year related to how many times a pre-authorized procedure that's pre-approved gets denied for authorization on the back end after you put the auth number on the claim form. And it's like 30%.
Right.
So denials don't mean bad billing. Keep an eye on them, but it is severe.
Yeah. And I think that just highlights the, when you accept insurance, it takes time to get paid. And like you just said, you could do everything perfectly right. and they're still going to deny it, and you still have to fight for it. So you have to be patient and wait for those payments to come in.
And they're high value claims oftentimes. So that's where the games tend to get played, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess all the more reason we have to be on top of it and paying attention all the time, because I often say nobody cares about your money more than you do.
That's true.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much. This is super helpful. I know we could spend hours going much deeper into revenue cycle. Maybe we'll do another session soon. But thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again so much for having me.